We are going to start today's session with a conversation with Eric Benhamou, founder and general partner of Benhamou Global Ventures. Eric is a longtime friend of mine and he's been here before. And I've watched how he has built Benhamou Global Ventures from the ground up. Eric, welcome back to the show, and we look forward to catching up.
Thanks, Ramana. Thanks for having me back.
So let's level set on where are you, in terms of the fund. What fund are you on? What's the size of the fund, and what's the fund strategy now?
Well, there's more than one fund now. We have 4 active funds, and two of them are fully invested. The last one is still in the midst of being raised. We're about 2/3 of the way. And in total, we have approximately $300 to $350 million in management. And because we have LPs around the world and a lot of relationships to manage, for the first time, we have to formalize our investor relations program, because we've got to keep in touch with all these investors, and they're not all the same. So we have an investor relations small group inside BGV to help us continue the growth. But that's basically approximately the size of the firm. And we don't expect it to be much bigger than this, because if we cross a certain threshold, the nature of what we do would fundamentally change. So we think we're optimally sized. And the focus of the firm has not changed. We've added a few nuances along the way, but basically we focus on young companies, and I'll refine this later. Companies who are basically driving the digital transformation of enterprises around the world. And that's true across all vertical sectors. And more specifically, what we focus on today in our Fund 4 is what we call Enterprise 4.0 companies. These are a little different from the companies that we would have considered, say, a decade ago. All Enterprise 4.0 companies have AI at the core. They leverage new data sets. They tend to be solutions oriented as opposed to components oriented. They typically deploy solutions in the form of intelligent automated workflows that fundamentally disrupt and improve the economics of the vertical sector. And these solutions tend to be adopted not centrally, but in business units, in divisions, in plants. And that makes them more attractive from a VC perspective, because the decision-making process is easier to deal with, it is faster, and it is more conducive to generating venture returns. And we found that these companies exist around the world, and I think that you wanted to explore geography as well. But let me just add this important nuance. These companies are not born in Silicon Valley. These companies are born in geographies thousands of miles away from here. They inevitably have to come to Silicon Valley because there is a stage of growth where the relationships you weave in Silicon Valley are essential. And we try to intercept them in that journey. So while they have the nexus in their geography of origin, and we can explore this more deeply, they end up looking like global companies with a Silicon Valley face very quickly. So that's basically what BGV is about today.
Right. So let's double click on a few different points. Maureen, there's a noise of some kind that I haven't heard before. I don't know where it's coming from, but in any case, it's a bit annoying. Anyway, so Eric, let's talk about check sizes. Where are you looking to come in? What level of validation needs to exist before you're willing to write those checks, and what size checks are you interested in writing?
Well, I'll describe the sweet spot and then the variations around that. A sweet spot of intersecting companies is when they have their first product out in the hands of customers. they may or may not be paying customers yet, but they're engaged enough that we can verify early stages, early signs of product market fit. So our mandate is not to take huge technology risks. We want to make sure technology is fundamentally working. We're prepared to underwrite all the other risks, such as market, company building, and so on. But in general, these are what you would call Series Seed Plus or Series A companies. That's roughly the stage in which we invest. And when we do that, we typically lead with a $3 to $5 million check. But sometimes we go upstream and we intercept companies even before they have their first products out, either because we're really convinced about what they're doing or we know the entrepreneurial team. There are reasons for us to mitigate that risk of going upstream. And when we do that, we typically start with a $250,000 check. And all in, when we stay with companies all the way through, we end up investing 15 to 20 million.
Okay.
So we don't drop companies when we get to a growth stage. We stay with them, and we stay with them all the way to an exit point. So as we describe ourselves as early stage, because that's fundamentally very different from what growth stage or expansion stage firms do. So anyway.
So another question along those lines I have is, when you're doing AI, typically there is machine learning involved and there is large data sets involved. What are you seeing in your portfolio or in your deal flow of how entrepreneurs are accessing that data? You're talking about taking the technology risk out. Well, you kind of need to have data to be able to take the technology risk out in AI companies. What are the best practices you are observing in your orbit?
Well, it is rare that young companies have access to vast proprietary data sets. Right. However, they could make this semi-proprietary by having unique curation methods and having a unique way of optimizing the algorithm to process that data. Let me give you an example. We recently invested in a company originally born in India called AI Dash, and they focus on processing satellite data imagery. And there's so much more of it today than even 5 years ago, because we keep launching satellites by the dozens per day. So there's an enormous amount of data available of high quality, which can be analyzed for a very specific purpose. And in their case, they use it to help companies like PG&E manage the physical assets. By analyzing this data, they're able to detect whether a shrub or a tree is going to interfere with a power line or a distribution center. And they're able to basically optimize for this use case all the way to the point of automating the workflow of dispatching the truck to go clear the overgrowth of shrubbery. So that's an example of data that's some of it is publicly available, some of it is available on license. However, the way you treat this data for the specific purpose is unique to AI Dash, and the way you incorporate this into a workflow is unique to what they do and the customer group that they cater to. And that's very typical of Enterprise 4.0 companies.
Okay. And am I picking up right that you are only focused on the enterprise, not on small business focused businesses?
Initially, yes. However, what happens is sometimes companies who are successful in large enterprises are able to evolve the offering to be totally PLG-like, so product-led growth, and go downstream or down markets and make their offerings suitable for small, medium-sized businesses. So this happens fairly often, but the point of entry, the point of validation is the large enterprise. We believe that they're the ones who who are confronted with the most difficult problems, and this is where you can erect the strongest barriers of entry in technology modes.
Good. All right. So, Eric, you must have read the articles that I have written recently about the past trends that is picking up. Actually, even one year ago, I think it was less prominent. Now it's more prominent, and I've had conversations with a lot of players who have either lots of integrations, API integrations into their platforms, and these are slightly larger companies, obviously. And in some cases, there are companies who have 25,000, 35,000, 45,000 developers, and they're really trying to build out the, Salesforce.com's SaaS strategy. And I think this thinking is is becoming a lot wider spread than I had noticed 2 years ago. I had, kind of seen this coming. I mean, I have talked to you about it, and I've seen this coming. It is picking up. That trend is definitely building. What is your analysis of this trend, and how does your fund see this trend, and how do you want to play in it?
Yeah, you're completely right about having described this trend as a very exciting trend. It's very important, and I think it reflects the fact that today to roll out applications that make a meaningful difference in the life of either consumers or enterprises, you have to optimize stacks. And the way to manage stack optimization is to have a platform-like approach with a rich tool set. So this is completely within the scope of what we do. Enterprise 4.0 companies come in the form of PaaS companies with rich tool sets. An example of this would be one of our larger companies is platform.sh. It's a French-born company, but it has offices in half a dozen different countries. And what they do is that they help companies optimize and manage fleets of websites. Sometimes we mistakenly think that a website is a unique thing, but in reality, large enterprises have hundreds, if not thousands, of websites that cater to different customer groups, partners, and so on. And to manage this in a consistent way, you require a unique tool set. You cannot manage these sites one at a time. So Platform does this in a very, very effective way for extremely large enterprises. And they do this by basically optimizing a stack that's unique to the way you build and run websites. And that's an example of us capitalizing on the past trend. More recently,
you covered platform.sh a while ago. At the time, obviously, this trend was not. It must have been 3-4 years ago. So I haven't talked to them since. So it's good to hear that you're thinking in this direction. I'll look into that more closely and see what additional coverage that deserves. But please go ahead. You were going to give us another example.
A more recent example. In fact, there was an investment that was announced just last week. It's a young company called Evinced. Evinced, like the word, the adjective evinced, EVINCED, and they focus on an important emerging problem called digital accessibility. So again, we talked about websites. Well, websites have to be digitally accessible by everybody, even people with a physical impairment. And it turns out that even if you have no physical impairments, many websites are not truly digital accessible, meaning that oftentimes there are fields that you cannot click on, or there are descriptions in extremely small font size or illegible font size. So there's a lot of UI, UX problems which impair digital accessibility for everybody, in particular for people who have physical impairments. And because we're proliferating applications, you cannot solve for these problems by having vast armies of QA engineers all over the world to check all these different versions being put out every day.
Yeah.
You have to have a tool set that automates the identification of these problems and the remediation of these problems. And that's what they do.
Okay.
So, and of course, they leverage AI in a way that fits the model that I described before. And they're and this is and they have basically a tool set and a stack that today is initially used by QA engineers downstream, but over a period of time, maybe two to 3 years, it'll be used by DevOps engineers at application creation time.
Okay.
It will shift left towards the upstream developments. And that's an example of a path optimized for a very specialized problem.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see this, trend or this structure of company building evolving? Like, in the case of Salesforce.com, we saw two things, right? We saw Salesforce.com itself becoming a gigantic success story with really a force multiplier effect on its valuation and so on. And then we also saw really great companies being built on Salesforce.com that in their own rights became very successful companies. Viva being one of my favorite examples. I've known the CEO of Viva for a long time, and they really built that company for $4 million. They raised more money, but they never really used it. They probably delivered $600 million worth of revenue with just $4 million in investment. So it does, if you play it right, and if you have a good marketplace, if you choose a good path which has a good marketplace, you can actually get very far with very little investment. How do you see that angle developing?
Well, you're right. So companies like Salesforce.com have created a vast ecosystem that makes it possible for a new generation of companies to live within it. We certainly view this as an opportunity because, we build value by stack levels. And if you come into an environment that already has a fully deployed Salesforce.com CRM system, you can take advantage of all the capabilities and APIs that's already exposed to create different kinds of value.
Yeah.
By the way, Salesforce.com, for all its successes, does not do everything perfectly. So there's a lot of territory that's undercovered. That's opportunity for entrepreneurs.
You're seeing all kinds of things. The company that I recently sent you is one of those gaps that exists in the Salesforce.com ecosystem.
Yeah, and we met them just a couple of days ago. And another example there is that Salesforce.com does not do a very good job of mobile engagements. Mm-hmm. And yet, despite the pandemic, we're still living in a world that's increasingly more mobile. So you have to be able to capitalize on mobile engagements opportunities all the time. And there are many things which are architecturally limiting in Salesforce that prevent it from doing a great job there. And that's a space which is available for younger companies who don't have the architectural baggage of Salesforce.
Mm-hmm. So from a fund strategy point of view, you would consider investing also in companies that build on somebody else's stack or somebody else's path?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great example of this as a category is MarTech tools.
Yes.
There's of course, some people say it's an overfunded space because there have been 8,000 to 9,000 companies funded there. But on the other hand, we have such an insatiable appetite for improving digital engagement tools, tools that help us better understand customer journeys in the digital world, that we consume these tools. At some point, we're going to have to do some rolling up and rationalization of these tools in coherent tool sets. And this is creating opportunities in its own right. But all of these tools, to your point, build on existing marketing stack layers. Yeah. Whether it's Adobe, Marketo, and so there's a whole bunch of stacks available, and they create a different way of solving a very important digital problem that leverages existing stack deployment.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Now, as you look around, you have your deal flow, you have your portfolio, you watch the broader trends. What are some things that you are looking for? Like you see something going on trend-wise, and you want to invest in that category or in that general trend. Are there nuggets that you could offer with more specific directions?
Well, there's really a lot, and frankly, I'm very optimistic about our industry right now. When I say our industry, I don't mean all of venture capital. As we discussed before, we focus on early stage, and one trend which accelerated in 2020, partly as a result of the pandemic, is that most of our peers started to deploy more of their capital downstream, meaning expansion and growth stage and later. And even though it was a record year in terms of amount of venture capital invested, much more of it was invested downstream, and much less of it, as a percentage, was invested in seed, Series C plus, Series A. So it makes this environment where we play less competitive, in the sense of there's much less chances of valuation inflation. And in fact, we've seen valuation inflation in Series C, D plus companies, but not at Series C and C plus. If anything, Series C valuations have tapered down a little bit in the last 2 or 3 quarters. So it's a very benign environment for us, and we want to take advantage of it. So that's more of a capital deployment trend, which I'm referring to. But in terms of opportunities in the end markets, you find them literally across the board of vertical sectors. I'll give you one which at first looks a bit far-fetched. Waste recycling, waste management.
Yeah.
I don't think of waste management as something fertile for technology disruption, but in fact it is. And I did not suspect that up until a year ago, but then I started to look into this more closely. First of all, there's a societal trend that we generate more and more waste. This is one of the attributes of consumer societies. But at the same time, we have less and less tolerance for poorly managed waste. We want to, as part of our climate change and climate control policies, we want to do a better job of recycling waste. And up until recently, waste management was really done exactly the same way as 30 years ago. So you would have big trucks collecting garbage from houses, office building, and so on, taking them to waste recycling facilities where you would have it would be dumped on treadmill-like structures, and you have people with goggles and gloves sorting out the waste and putting the aluminum cans in a big bin and the milk jugs in a different bin, and then sending this off to be resold as recycled material. So this is begging for disruption.
Yeah, it's a robotics problem. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a robotics, machine vision problem, control, analytics, but basically every neighborhood has a waste profile. And this waste profile can be used to train an AI engine to recognize all of these objects. And robots can pick these objects much more safely and faster than human beings. And they can be recycled in ways which are much higher quality of material, basically. So this is an example of a complete solution taking advantage of AI, new data sets, which is basically collected by machine vision cameras, and resulting in a much improved workflow. So it hits all of the aspects of enterprise 4.0 companies. And not only that, but it produces cash-on-cash returns, which are unbeatable. So you have, and you can deploy this in one recycling center without having to get clearance from the chief technology officer of the entire company. So you have a lot of the attributes we look for in an enterprise 4.0 startup.
And this is something you have invested in already.
Yeah, we have invested in a company that's in this space. There's been a few other big investments made by other firms there because this space is just begging for disruptive solutions.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Very good. And one other trend that I will share with you, and then we'll move on to listening to entrepreneurs. We picked this up a while ago, and again, this trend has built up more, and especially I think in COVID, it has moved up significantly. It's this bootstrapping with a paycheck trend. People are starting side businesses and doing side businesses, validating side businesses, and coming into full-time entrepreneurship later in the cycle. I don't know if you're seeing this in your deal flow, but we are certainly seeing this in our community a lot.
Yeah, we've not seen this as much, and sometimes we're a bit mistrustful of these businesses because if a young business or if a small business has lived on at small scale for a long time, we have some doubts about the entrepreneur's fundamental drive to build an impactful business. And for us, we have a mandate from our own investors. We need to generate venture returns, and you cannot generate venture returns without scale. So a business which has operated in say $1 million revenue range for 5 years, which all of a sudden now claims to want to grow at 100% a year, it's possible. We love this, but we're going to scrutinize this very closely because it's not just a question of opportunity; it's a question of desire and drive.
Well, I don't think that's the profile of the companies that I'm talking about. For example, in enterprise, especially getting meetings with people to validate your idea already takes several months.
Yes.
So what that validation phase of getting the right meetings and talking to the right people to get validation on your idea, to even scope out the product and so forth, is a I would say 9, 12, 18-month process. And during that period, there is not huge upside in quitting your job and cutting off your source of income for most people. So I think people are coming to realize that. And I think especially in enterprise, this is a very important trend to note that you can actually fund your seed stage with your paycheck and get to validation before you quit your job.
Yeah, you're right, Sramana. These profiles exist, and we love them. What I was reacting to more is people who've had a lifestyle business for many years who now pretend to be entrepreneurs because it's fashionable, and so we have to separate out these two flows. But you're right. It happens very often that an entrepreneur has a great idea, but it takes more than a year to get any kind of seed capital to put the idea into at least prototype form. So we typically we don't have the resources to scout for these sort of entrepreneurs because there's only so many people in our firm. We try to operate one or two levels downstream from there.
Yes, I know.
But as you know, we've made an effort to scout for these entrepreneurs in India through our incubator ARCA, which has identified close to 30 such companies in the last 3 years, and we think there's going to be many more in the next 3 years. So we're trying to catch them one level earlier, and then as they get to a certain level, they fall into a field of vision, and then we can pick them up here at BGV, and hopefully lead a Series A round or something like that.
Yeah.